The James Bond series does not need Christopher Nolan. On one of my recent videos, someone commented that getting Christopher Nolan to make a James Bond movie is the only way to make the Bond franchise relevant again and popular among a younger generation. That is not true, and here's why. Now, to give Christopher Nolan his due, he is a massive James Bond fan, he respects the hell out of the franchise, and if he made a James Bond movie, yeah, a lot of people would go see it and it'd make a lot of money. But I don't think he's the right director for James Bond for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I think his visual style is very cold and not sexy enough, and James Bond movies need to be sexy. But even more importantly, Christopher Nolan's biggest deficiency as a filmmaker is that his scripts have a tendency to be very overwrought, and that's not something I want brought into James Bond. And there's a number of directors that I would frankly prefer. Joseph Kosinski, Christopher McQuarrie, Matthew Vaughn, Martin Campbell, who's already directed 2 James Bond films. I think there is a way to make the James Bond series relevant among a younger generation without getting the wrong director. I want to go through a historical example to make this point. There was a time in my relatively short lifetime that the viability of the James Bond franchise and its ability to click with the younger generation was seriously doubted. And that was during the few years preceding the release of the 1995 James Bond movie GoldenEye. GoldenEye marked the debut of a new James Bond actor, Pierce Brosnan, and it didn't try and reinvent the wheel. It really stuck to the James Bond formula, but crucially, it executed that formula just about perfectly. And to direct GoldenEye, the producers didn't try to get some titan of Hollywood like Steven Spielberg, who had just won an Oscar, and they didn't go for some wonder kid like Quentin Tarantino. They got Martin Campbell to direct it, who was mainly known for his work in television. And GoldenEye, because it was a fantastic James Bond movie, revived the franchise and brought it to a whole new audience. But what amplified the impact that GoldenEye had on the younger generation of the time, even beyond the movie, was the Nintendo 64 tie-in video game. The reason I laid out the GoldenEye scenario is because the James Bond series is in kind of a similar position now. A number of people now are questioning whether James Bond can still be relevant. However, there is an opportunity to make a splash with the next James Bond movie, James Bond 26, which, like GoldenEye, is going to be the debut of a new James Bond actor. And there's another James Bond video game on the way. Without getting super in the weeds as to how Bond 26 would appeal to a younger generation, suffice it to say this: Bond 26 needs to be a fun, good James Bond movie. It can't be a dour mess of a film like the last Bond movie, No Time to Die. Also, IO Interactive is working on a new James Bond video game under the working title Project 007. Gaming is very popular among younger generations, and so if IO Interactive's game manages to come out around the same time as Bond 26, and it uses the voice and likeness of the new James Bond actor, well, then you have the perfect tie-in for driving younger audience members to the theater to see Bond 26. If Eon Productions has a return to form on Bond 26 and they strategize with the video game tie-in, they don't need Christopher Nolan to make Bond relevant.